The Last of Us was filmed across several different locations in Alberta, Canada, which happens to be the province that I live in, and I was lucky enough to be cast as a background extra in episode 9, the season 1 finale. I wanted to make this video to talk about my experience. It was my first time doing any kind of extra work, and I thought it would be fun to share the details with you. And of course, since I'm a miniature artist, I also decided to build a hospital diorama based on this episode, featuring custom action figures of my character, as well as Pedro Pascal's character, Joel. If you want to see more of that, stick around until the end of the episode. So I first heard that they were filming in Alberta back in late 2021. They were going around to different locations in the province, including my home city of Edmonton. They transformed our downtown area into this post-apocalyptic scene that looked like it was straight out of the video game. I thought it was really cool, but at that time, the thought of becoming a background extra hadn't crossed my mind at all. Fast forward a few months, and a couple of my friends who live in the city of Grande Prairie sent me a link to a website that was advertising an open casting call for people to be extras on a TV show. Now, they didn't say which TV show it was, but we kind of assumed it was The Last of Us. It said that they were looking for people with a weathered look, and since I had been growing out my hair and my beard at that time, I figured, you know what, I might have a chance at this. Let me email them this photo and we'll see what happens. After a few days, I got a phone call from the casting company saying that I had been picked to be an extra. I was going to be playing the role of a Firefly, and I believe they picked around 15 to 20 people to be a part of the scene. They confirmed my availability and said they needed me for a week of filming in Grande Prairie, but first they needed me to go down to Calgary a couple weeks before filming to do a wardrobe fitting. So I drove down to Calgary and went to their office, and after filling out some paperwork, they sent me to the wardrobe department where some stylists were waiting for me. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't take any photos inside because they held onto my phone, but basically I got to try on a bunch of different outfits. They were swapping pieces in and out until they found a look that they were happy with. In my case, I had on a green hoodie, a black jacket on top, some cargo pants, and some boots. When my outfit was finalized, they took a photo of me wearing the clothes, and then they sent me over to the props department, which I really enjoyed seeing. They had tons of different accessories there, things like weapons, ammo, all kinds of different props. And they picked out a rifle for me, a weapons vest, and a weapons belt. They adjusted some of the straps so that everything would fit my body comfortably, and then once everything was set, they took another photo of me, then I changed out of my clothes, and then I went back home to Edmonton for a couple of weeks. And then in May 2022, I drove from Edmonton all the way up to Grande Prairie. Luckily, I had some friends over there that let me stay with them for a week while we filmed. The night before we started, I got an email confirming the filming location, and they also gave me a call time for when I needed to be there. It was pretty early in the morning. I think it was around 5:30 or 6 a.m. on the first day. So I arrived at the location. We were filming in an old hospital called the Queen Elizabeth II Hospital, and normally it looks like this, but for the show, they repainted all the walls green and they made it look old and weathered just like in the video game. Unfortunately, they didn't let us take photos of the set, but it was still really awesome to see. We all had to get COVID tested. They were being extra cautious because they didn't want things spreading around to the crew members on set. So people had to take a test every single morning when they arrived, and everyone was wearing a mask pretty much all the time. We also got to eat breakfast before we started, and they had some wonderful food on set. There was a food truck outside with a bunch of different options catering to all sorts of different tastes and diet restrictions. Every day was something different. They even had vegan stuff, gluten-free stuff, lots of variety. So I took my food and I ate in the cafeteria, and then I went up to the background holding area, which was an old doctor's lounge that was secluded from the rest of the set. I got to meet some of the other extras and then was introduced to the background coordinator, who was really nice. And then once we were all settled in, they sent us over to the wardrobe department to get our costumes. Everything was organized really well. We each had our own costume numbers that remained the same throughout filming. One thing that I noticed right away is that they had intentionally distressed our clothing. So the boots were covered with fake mud, and then the hoodies had like dirt and everything on them. So that really made it fit the scenario, which was really neat. After we got dressed, they sent us over to the hair and makeup department. These people were really friendly. They basically covered our faces with makeup to make them look oily and dirty. They also covered our hands and fingernails with dirt, and if we had tattoos, they would cover those up as well. And I also got my hair done. In my case, they slicked my hair back into a ponytail, and this is what I looked like in costume as a Firefly. Once we were all dressed up and ready, they sent us back to the background holding area, and this is where the waiting game began. One thing you should definitely know if you want to become a background extra is that you'll spend a lot of time sitting around and waiting until they need you. You got to be very patient. I would suggest bringing something like a book or something to do to keep you occupied. We didn't have our phones, so we couldn't use social media or surf the internet. So we spent a lot of time talking to each other, just getting to know the other extras. Eventually we started playing card games like Uno. Some people played board games. One person brought a Nintendo Switch eventually, and we got to play that for a little bit. Some people were doing push-ups. We were just doing random things to keep ourselves busy. The extras were of different ages, from different backgrounds, and had all kinds of different personalities, so there were a lot of interesting people to talk to. After a few hours of waiting, we got to break for lunch and had another meal from the catering truck. We came back to the holding room, and then at one point, one of the assistant directors came in and explained the backstory of the show to us, along with the scene that we were filming. He basically said that he wanted to get the extras in there at some point, but the timing would depend on how the filming was progressing. So we waited some more. Luckily, in between meals, they had this craft services area that we called Crafty, and you could basically go there and grab some snacks. They had things like fruit, muffins, cookies, chips, drinks. Sometimes they would have little wraps or veggie bowls too, which was great. But for that entire first day, we didn't get used on set at all. It was a very long day. I think it was about 13 hours that we spent there. But it wasn't that bad because we got to meet a lot of new people, we ate some great food, and just basically played card games the entire time. At the end of the day, we changed out of our clothes and then went home for the night. They emailed us the call time for the next day. These times would change from day to day. It was usually in the morning around 6 or 7 a.m., but sometimes it was a little bit later, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and I think once it was even at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And then we'd usually film until 6 or 7 in the evening. We repeated the exact same process the next day. We got there, got dressed up into our costumes, went to hair and makeup, and then waited in the background holding area. It was kind of interesting at certain points because you could hear stuff happening in the distance. Sometimes the crew was giving instructions over the radio. Once in a while you'd hear some gunfire sounds popping off, but we didn't see very much for the first couple of days from our enclosed background holding area. They were recording in different parts of the hospital floor. Sometimes they were close to the background holding area, other times they were far away. A couple times I did get a glimpse of some of the stuntmen firing some of their weapons. I also got to see the video playback from an operating room scene that they were working on at one point. I got to see the lead actors from a distance, Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal. They were maybe 40, 50 feet down a hospital hallway. But for the most part, the background extras stayed in the holding area. You gotta understand that there's so many factors that affect the timing and scheduling of filming, and for the first 5 days that we came in, they didn't need us on set. Some of the other extras couldn't commit to more than a few days, so they never ended up making it onto the set. But finally, on the 6th day, they called us in and said they needed the extras on set. We walked over to a weapons storage area and they handed me a rifle. And one thing to note is that they were very cautious about handling the guns. They opened them up and showed me that there was no live ammo in there. It was completely empty. The scene that we were filming was when Joel, Pedro Pascal's character, is waking up in a hospital room and interacting with some of the Fireflies. The hospital bed was maybe 30 feet in front of me, so not too close, but I could still see Pedro a little bit. The extras were all scattered around in the background of the scene, kind of far away from the cameras, just adding a little bit of subtle movement and atmosphere. The assistant director came up to us and gave us instructions as far as what to do. Some of us were having conversations with each other without making any sound, of course. Other people were just walking around. Some people were moving some crates back and forth. And when it was time to film, the cameras would start rolling, the background extras would start moving around, and then the director would yell action. The actors would do their thing for about a minute or two, and then they'd stop and repeat the process over again. They recorded several takes with different variations. Sometimes they would come in and move a background extra from one position to another position, and at one point they just felt that there were too many background extras in the scene, and they removed a bunch of people. At the end of the day, we knew that there was no guarantee that we'd be visible on camera. It would all come down to how they edited the footage together and which takes they decided to use. And by the way, I just watched the episode and it turns out that I was not visible in it, but the cool thing is that you could see the guy who was next to me. He was sitting on the crate right here. He's obviously blurry because of the depth of field of the camera, but I was standing a little bit in front of him, just out of view. So anyway, we wrapped at the end of the day and then we went home and that was it. I personally enjoyed the experience because it was fascinating to see just how things operated behind the scenes, and I would definitely do it again. This was a big budget production. You had so many people involved. Obviously there's hair and makeup, wardrobe, catering, sound, lighting. You had stunt coordinators. There's just tons of people coming together to make this show happen, and that was really cool to see. As far as getting paid, they mailed me a check about 10 to 14 days after we wrapped. I won't go into specific detail about how much I earned, but they basically clocked all the hours that I was there every single day and then gave me an hourly wage. I don't know how the pay would compare to other TV shows, but this is a big budget production, so I'm assuming that we got compensated a little bit better than you would on smaller TV shows. All of the food they provided was free too. We would get breakfast, lunch, and a bunch of snacks every day. There were a couple of times that we got dinner as well, so overall I was very happy with the compensation. So anyway, now we get to the fun part. I'm gonna build a diorama of the hospital set and create a scene with some action figures of Joel and my character getting into an encounter. I already had a custom Pedro Pascal action figure that I put together in this video right here. I just changed the shirt from a green one to a blue shirt to match the scene in this episode. And now I'll show you how I built this action figure of my character. I started off by using a 3D scanner called the Revopoint POP to generate a 3D model of my face. This is the scan that I ended up with. I had to make a few touch-ups to clean up the model, and then I sent it over to my resin 3D printer to print some miniature head sculpts. Once they were done, I sprayed on some primer, and then I began painting it. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to painting. I want to get into airbrushing eventually, but for now, I'm just painting everything by hand with a paintbrush. The eyes are by far the hardest part for me to do, but I'm fairly happy with the way this head sculpt turned out. I picked out some clothes that matched the outfit that I had on set and dressed a generic action figure body with them. And then I put the head on top to complete the figure. Next, I needed to make some props for the scene. I 3D printed a bunch of miniature items, mainly with my FDM printer. Things like crates, hospital equipment, a door, just some random parts to fill out the scene. And then I painted each of them individually. I tried to make them look intentionally old and weathered just like on the show, and this is how they turned out. I used foam board and paper to create the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. I glued all the parts together and laid down the foundation for the room. I splattered some paint on the walls to dirty them up. And then I started filling out the space with the props. I put the action figures inside, and then when everything was in place, I took a photo with my camera to end up with this. I basically reimagined the scene as if I was hunting down Joel with some of the other Fireflies. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, leave me a comment, and you can check out more of my work on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Dwayne Shoots Toys.